The other thing I would say is this, though. To be fair, though, even D-Man's case shows, by the way, you'll never get away with it, because what happened when finally he had his moment? They put all the daggers in this motherfucker's back. And then if you know the story, that not only did they not even slightly accommodate him when he just wanted to live in the same country and travel there, by the way, to maintain a fucking relationship, perfectly reasonable reason to say I can't move right now. Not only did they not help him out, but then later, people might know this story because me and Richard have told it because it's just so fucking tragic. Later, he actually decided he did want to be a caster in League of Legends when it didn't work out in CSGO, and they intentionally put this guy through the ringer where he had to go for like 1 million interviews and all this like humiliating shit where you're basically getting interviewed by people who like essentially you shouldn't even be fucking be qualified to pick your jockstrap up, and at the end of it all just went, sorry, you know, don't call us, we'll call you, and then just left him next to a fucking phone never to ring.
I was in the office when that happened, when he was fucking coming and looking fucking Prada bags under his eyes. He'd been around the world for, you know, through like a bunch of fucking, you know, random folk who barely knew who he was. I remember when he came back from America, I felt fucking awful for the guy, really.
It's like a humiliation ritual, doesn't it? It sounds fucked up.
Like, they present it like, you know, similar, and the fucking, in the IEM final, right? This was kind of after that. So, you know, guy kind of fucking put a stick in his spokes, didn't he?
Listen, yeah, obviously he did some shit, but I'm just saying on the Riot side, it's like they, because the way they would cleverly present what they were doing with those interviews is they just make it sound like, you know, in our company, everyone has to be comfortable that you join, so you just got to check, like, you know, the temperature.
But you already worked with him for years. You know exactly who he is.
The culture fit. Yeah.
The reality is, what they were actually doing was essentially a sort of fucked up hazing ritual, and if you get through it, they think you're cool. You get to join the frat, sort of. That's like the vibe, you know.
No, it's like, oh, we've been hurt our trust a little bit, you know, you didn't come with us before and might take a while to rebuild that. They fucking love that shit. They never forget. They never forgive. And even if they end up working with you, mate, they'll always remind you.
Oh, there's so much psychic warfare going on here. This is one of the reasons I laid out the episode at the beginning.
This is what I was going to say. It's a good point to pivot, like, because what I've heard is going on among the Valorant talent, among other things, is, so for example, after I did my opinion piece about Sean and DDK and basically listed all of Riot games, well, that wasn't even all, it probably wasn't even 25%, but it was a comprehensive list of some of their most egregious controlling decisions. But there was a number of people behind the scenes who reached out to me and said, holy fucking shit, that bit about the fealty testing is absolutely spot on. And what they're doing is, like, why do you ever need to do this? It's so, and why would anyone sort of like acquiesce to this? I don't know. But what they do is, by way of for instance, is they go to a duo, an established duo, and they go to the one caster and they say, look, listen, we really like you, but we don't like your partner. Just a heads up, you should maybe like cast a few games with some other people. And then they go to the other partner in that duo and say, you know, don't tell your partner, but we really like you. We don't like them. It'd be good if you cast with other people. And I've had a number.
Come out of a fucking Lindsay Lohan movie in the 90s. What the fuck is this? Like, this is some high school shit.
It's absolutely pathetic.
Shit. What is this?
And you know, and put it this way, that's not like one. That's not one member of talent like telling me that. That's like multiple members of talent telling me that is just like, when they read that in the article, they were like, holy fucking shit. Like, yeah, they've done that to us. We just found out, you know, or like, so why would you be doing that if you're not actively trying to fuck with talent? Also, just as another thing as well, by the way, they have also, and I know this for a fact. So for me, rates, discussing your day rate, it should be relatively private. Like, you should, you know, if I've got my day rate, if I want to share it with other talent, I can. But if I go to someone and say, this is my rate, I don't expect them to then tell that rate to somebody else. I think that's highly unprofessional.
That's reasonable.
Do that. Yeah. And obviously, guess what? I've talked to a number of talent in Valorant who have been proactively told other talents' rates, not by the talent, but by Riot or a entity that are hiring on behalf of Riot. That's fucking outrageous.
Presumably in this scenario of like, you're asking for that, but you know, this guy who's bigger than you only asks for 100 less.
Basically done for two things. First of all, as part of a sort of secret haggling process. But then the other component of it, of course, is, it brings rates down overall, encourages undercutting. You know, if I say to you, like, oh, you know, listen, you and this guy are similar, they're asking, you know, 5K a day you know, it's outrageous. And we're not willing to go beyond this. We think you're worth that. But, you know, suddenly you're going, all right, okay, yeah, I guess overall that is a bit wild. I guess I'll have to bring my rates down and think accordingly. They just keep everyone on fucking tenterhooks. It's all part of this like insane game that they play with talent. And what it ultimately boils down to, it is about the money, sure, but it is also just about they want to see who will betray everyone else in the scene, betray the scene itself to swear fealty to Riot. And if you do that enough and you do it often and you fuck everybody else, who knows, you might even get invited to the table.
If you reduce the leverage enough. Yeah.
But here's the thing, guys, and here's why the casters have no power, because Valorant probably is going to franchise. It's probably, you know, like we said earlier, there aren't many TOs that want to pick this up right now. It's probably going to be franchised because Riot wants to sell the franchises. And then once the franchise system exists, they're going to get rid of co-streaming. Look at what happened to co-streaming with LCS. You can see they just keep cutting it down, cutting it down, cutting it down. And the reason is because they cannot sell sponsors against things that are heavily co-streamed. Or it's a lot less attractive, at least, to get sponsors against things that are heavily co-streamed. That's been my experience talking to sponsors. Okay, they're wise to it now. I think they would initially, at the very beginning, you could probably dupe them, be like, look at our viewership numbers. They wouldn't ask questions, but now there are increasingly more questions in the space about what percentage of this is co-streamed, etc. Because, you know, they don't necessarily get the same brand value from the shoutouts from the co-streamer or the attention to detail on the sponsors that is required on the mainstream. Also, you can't necessarily control what the co-streamer says. A lot of the LCS co-streamers were very negative about the LCS, made it look like a garbage product. Therefore, you know, you get the association of it being garbage with your brand. Sponsors don't like that. So what's going to happen is you're probably going to franchise at some point in time. And then, because when they cut off co-streaming or cut it down dramatically, they're going to be able, everybody's just going to have to watch on their stream. And it doesn't matter what casters they have, guys. It doesn't matter. And it's the only place you can go. So you're going to have to accept whatever rates they offer. And that's just it. And they play this game, and they're going to cut rates, by the way, because the LoL rates are higher. The viewership will be lower for Valorant. And they have
year after year, they'll snip a bit off each time. Yep.
Or they'll just slow growth on caster rates. And the reason they can do this, guys, is because they'll be like, well, you know, our budget is only XYZ, because we've talked about this on other shows. There is no transparency into how much money the esports marketing project is creating. We don't know, because the developers won't share it with anybody, including the partner teams on franchising, how much money they estimate that they make from retaining people in esports. How much money does the average esports fan spend in the game compared to a non-esports fan? I'd guess it's a lot more. Pretty sure they would have stopped doing this if they didn't think they were making money, significant amounts of money, having extreme player retention among esports fans. And they can track this, guys. If you're logged in getting drops, they can see your account. They say, well, my favorite player just played with this skin. They see, oh, there go the skin sales up right after that game, right? Or in the next few days. So there are all these ways that are hidden, so they can say, oh, I'm really struggling financially, because all that's siloed off from everyone else in the esports scene, right? It's very clear if you're an independent tournament operator, how much money you're making and losing based on the sponsorships and the sales and the media rights, which is another issue we'll get into. But what Riot uses every trick in the book. What they did to me was egregious in and of itself. The first world championship for League of Legends that I worked in 2013. First off, they tried to lie to me. They told me my contract with OGN, a separate company, which was a TV station in Korea, my contract with them for League of Legends to do the Korean League applied to Riot's International World Championship. So they tried to get me to do it for zero money. And when I said, whoa, no, that they're like, oh, it's our partner. I'm like, that's not my contract, guys. Like, that's scummy.
They attempted a Jedi mind trick, though.
Yeah, it was a nice attempt. They did actually succeed the Jedi mind trick on double lifting Crepo for that world championship. They ended up saying, oh, well, the exposure will be worth it for World. So they tried the exposure trick. And then they tried, we'll pay you $3,000, not a day, for an entire world championship where I was on the desk for every fucking game of the whole world championship. I probably made, if you count all my research, all the time that I had to put in meetings and everything like that, I was probably legit like making like $15 an hour to be at the Staples Center and broadcasting the world championship. And you know what's worse, guys? there were two pro players on
10%
the
of standard,
desk.
right? Yeah.
There were two other pro players on the desk, Prepo and Double Lift, and Riot told them that their player contracts with their teams covered the World Championship. So they made $0 for being on every single game at the World Championship. So you guys ask like why I'm frustrated with Riot. So they pulled that trick. I did it anyway because I wanted the exposure, and I did gain something from it, right? But it's still ethically wrong to do what they did. And then the whole thing, why it came to a boiling point and why the Korean casters, including myself, Doa and Papa Smithy, boycotted MSI was because I talked to casters in 7 different games, and we were on a call, and I said, here's the rate for Halo. Here's the rate for StarCraft. Here's the rate for Dota. Here's the rate for Counter-Strike for top casters. And I gave them ranges, outlined it all. And I was like, we just want an industry standard rate. That's all we want. And they said, they tried to gaslight us. This is literally what they said on the call. Those are not industry standard rates. We are the industry standard rate. And at that point, I was like, okay, like we've completely broken down at this point in time. There is no more negotiating because they thought they could strong arm us into do it. And they thought they could break us apart. And they tried to break us apart separately and trying to offer us different deals and blah, blah, blah. And we fortunately stood strong on that one. And eventually, like, barring other shit that happened with me that was unrelated to this bargaining, people did get better rates for events in the future. And it actually, like, in many ways, after I revealed a lot of this information, a lot of Riot casters then had their salaries, like, sometimes doubled because they were getting paid such shit amounts of money by Riot and not making any money, as I said, doing IEM events. And they would get paid the same amount of money if they were selected to do international events, which, by the way, is months of international travel. And they would get paid the exact same amount of money because they were full-time employees and they weren't on day rates, et cetera, and they weren't on these contracts. So there was a massive, massive, massive history of Riot behaving in extremely bad faith in negotiations. And guess what, guys? All the people who did this, they're still there. They're still doing this, guys. They're still there. So apparently, it's the exact same people. And you can tell that clearly Riot is totally okay with this. They're totally fine with it because they probably think these guys are doing a great job, right? And from a talent perspective, that's why it is worthless. And that's why you see talent just hitting a wall and leaving, especially developer-run esports, to try and do other things because there isn't a way you can get paid as much as even a mediocre player in a lot of these games. There isn't an appreciation of your ability, of your dedication to the game, of your knowledge of the game's history. They will literally throw you out at the first opportunity because they don't care about these things. They don't care about your skill because when you have a monopoly, people are going to watch that stream no matter what. They don't have to choose between 2 different broadcasters. And here, guys, I can even prove to you how important casters are when there are multiple broadcasts. Back in the day, when I was working at OGN, now, Blizzard did a very stupid deal where we had to broadcast the same games of StarCraft that Tasteless and Artosis did. And the thing is when they made WCS, which was the Blizzard official StarCraft, like, global league, they made it so GSL, like Code S, would alternate with OGN's Star League, okay? But they said, oh, well, we're just going to have 2 English casts, but whoever is, the studio will change. So sometimes it was Tasteless and Artosis at the GSL studio. They were in the studio, had all the fancy shots, all the production value. And Doa and I were in like an empty room, basically, right? It was a lot more boring. Now, sometimes they were, for a season, Star League was in the OGN studio. So we had all the fancy shots and Tasteless and Artosis were in a room. Tasteless and Artosis obviously crushed me and Doa in terms of viewership. Crushed it when they were alone in the studio. Then, in League of Legends, we saw the exact same thing. Oh, well, Riot comes in and they said, OGN, you don't get to broadcast all of the games. We're splitting up the days between OGN and SPO TV, which is a different place with a different studio. Now, SPO TV would get their own casters. And
LS.
Yeah, they got LS. And now, at that time, myself and Doa and Achilleos, right, and Papa Smithy would literally sit in a fucking closet, like basically just like a soundproof closet at the OGN studio. And we would have 95% of the viewership of the games in the SPO TV studio. So you can tell instantly how valuable those commentators are, because I've been on both the 5% and the 95% part of that equation with people who are well known within those games. So you cannot come and tell me that there isn't value to commentators, because it has been fucking proven by these broadcasts in Korea of having different people commentate the same games. And even though there are sometimes games in which the favorite commentators aren't on site and are doing a scuffed ass, basically co-stream, they still get all the viewership.
The Overwatch League has done a lot of these sort of surveys, and they've really tried to quantify the effect of casting. And what I can say is that, like, there's a drastic effect. I would say that like 95% or 90% of viewers probably don't care who's casting unless it's like the top known names, then they care. But otherwise, like, they don't. Like, it does move the needle in a big way for them. And I think the Overwatch League has gone to great extent. I think they went to sort of focus groups and survey to try and find a way to, like, can we like drop some of these rates down at the high end? And they realized that, oh fuck, the data doesn't actually agree with what our inclination is. I know they wanted to drop my rate, for example, but the data did not support their position, so to speak. So the studies have been done, whether it's how esports drives MTX and retention in game, or how casters, or broadcast quality drives viewership. These studies have all been done. It should be empirical by now, and yet we're still casters are still having to try and carve out a niche and say, hey, we actually do bring value here, and that's proportional to how long we've worked, how much exposure and experience we've had, whether we have the right pairing, all that sort of stuff. Like, we still have to go back and have these same conversations and find ways to prove it to these people when they have the data that agrees with us, but they, do what they want with it. So,
by the way, Monty, I just want to clarify something. On that story, this was from 2016, if you remember, where Monty and Doa and Papa Smithy did the boycott around MSI. Right, as you said, when you surveyed other people as to what like industry rates were, right? So we're talking about the Riot casters, the ones that had the Riot in front, their name and on LCS and Worlds and MSI. And as we're saying, Monty's saying they just had one flat yearly salary and they would do all these events, right? Like, off the top, give me a range. Weren't they making something like, wasn't it like between like 50 and 100k or something, right? That was like the kind of salary they were on yearly, right? This is the reason why I can tell you Riot Games are liars, because I remember the year Monty's talking about. I just looked it up now because I have all my like data in file, right? And I looked up for that year, 2016, which by the way wasn't even the biggest year of CSGO. Like, we had a couple of years later where the rates went up like 1.5, 2 times the amount. For 2016, just my CSGO events, I made over 100k. And that was my side gig. I was a journalist and I did events on the side. Now, remember, these people were working full time. They had like Uber did when he worked for ESL. Like, the days they're not on broadcast, by the way, they're in a fucking office doing meetings and production things and improv classes and all. Like, they essentially had a full-time job and doing these giant international events, like Monty says, where you go and you get absolutely wrecked, by the way. You need like 2 weeks nowadays to recover from that shit. That's how hard it is. Yeah. And they were making less than I was in a side game, which, if you believed all the stuff about franchises, you should never be able to pay casters. But the problem was the side game had an open circuit and all these things we've talked about that can raise rates and make it so there's competition and that you have to hire certain people if they are the best, etc. So you can see the effect it can have. Essentially, if Monty and them didn't do that, those Riot casters would just be trapped in that fucking prison for the rest of their careers. That would just be the choice would be either don't get to cast on the broadcast or take it for this money. They kind of were over a barrel at that point in time. So I just thought I'd say that to show, like, remember, I wasn't even close to the highest paid caster in the world in esports. Like, 100k is nothing compared to what Monty was making at the time for his OGN contract. Like, I think people realize they don't know essentially how bad the lives of their favorite casters, fucking Freak, Kobe, Jack, there's a reason why some of these people later on separated themselves or did other things or got mega fucking promotions, etc. These guys were getting min-maxed, even the best casters.
Yeah, I mean, and I think people, like, if you look at people like Jat, he was definitely at the top of the pay scale as far as broadcasters, but he still left to go coach, guys. Yeah. That's because there is like there's a fucking ceiling to this shit that doesn't exist. Like, most broadcasters in like the NFL make more than most head coaches, or it's comparable, right? It's comparable, and it's just not there. Like, as the scene expands, because again, the developers are able to like hide the money that they're making from this, and Uber was talking about this on Twitter as well, but there are no media rights deals, right? That's where most money from sports comes from, is from selling the ability to broadcast the game to media networks. And we don't have that at all because Twitch has a monopoly. Now, I do think that even if the TOs were selling the media rights like Overwatch League did, right? For famously $100 million for 2 years.
Yeah,
now,
we
I
still
don't think that trickles down to dev run games, because again, they'll just take all that money and say, well, we can get anybody because we have a monopoly. So I don't think that would actually affect caster rates, because they'll just keep
Well,
the
it's a
money.
loss leader half the time anyway. Like, you know, like this is what they're fucking LCS. It's not profitable. Don't even imagine. Like the Overwatch League, they have to like deliver ROI to investors. So there is like some degree where they need to try and let the black box of the league turn out a profit. But how are they going to justify like allocating a reasonable size of budget when these things just the hemorrhage money because they can't fucking monetize so many aspects of it? It definitely affects things. But and like we had this Overwatch League, guys, every year since the Overwatch League started, the caster budget has been cut every fucking year.
By the way, it didn't go up when allegedly they got a very good deal from YouTube, guys.
Fuck no.
Weird how that went.
They
The
never
caster
tell you.
rates went down when that
And I
happened.
go, who the fuck set these right? Who set this budget? And they're like, oh, it was set last year, well in advance. Like they fucking set budgets months before they start negotiating. So what they do, they get the little fucking Hello Kitty pad out. They go, right, well, yeah, we're definitely not going to have to pay more than this for this guy and this for that guy. And they make these assumptions on what these salaries going to cost them that are baseless and often come from none of their, like them not understanding at all how casting works. How
They also
casters
never
are
get pay
valued.
cuts. You notice that.
Yeah,
like-
fuck no, absolutely not. And so then they go, okay, yeah, here's what we need. Budget gets set. Then they come to us, and then we go, hang on, that ain't it. They're like, the budget, we can't get any more money. It's just this is it. And I would assume that a lot of the reason why Sean and Dan had problems was budgetary as well. Because here's what people don't realize: the people running Valorant esports were also running Legends of Runeterra and Wild Rift esports. It was those three all at once. It was this tiny ass understaffed team. And eventually they probably put a lot more attention towards Wild Rift, but for a while it was just that. So like, you know, they had no idea how to sort of what they were supposed to be paying casters. That's why they outsourced all of it to fucking Nerd Street. Although they did definitely give some oversight on how much, you know, was reasonable to pay people. You know, I don't know if they fixed rates in the negative or the positive, but I know that there was definitely, you know, dialogue there. But whenever you ask where these budgets come from, someone just waves their hands and then they forget they're even talking to you.
Well, Sean
hard
even
to
said
divide.
it himself on his first stream after it happened. He said, like, so first of all, he was like, listen, I took a 20% pay cut over the year, which is like, since then the dollar's fucking tanked. You got all this inflation shit going on, obviously, as well. I mean, like, some of these people like live in California, like that shit ain't cheap. Living expenses never really gets factored into any of this.
Oh, no.
It was why
I mean, Richard,
I
I made more money casting in Korea relative to cost than I did
Oh, I
moving
believe it.
back to
Yeah.
America, because
Totally
it's
believe
way
it.
less
Totally
expensive to
believe
live in Korea.
Totally believe it. And so you've got that, and then on top of that, you know, Sean even said, like, look, he just wants to be there. So listen, there's a world of difference between.
He said he would do it for
saying,
free.
Yeah, there's a world of difference between, and I want to make this
Bad,
clear. There's a world of difference between saying you'll do it for free to essentially undercut like all of the talent and make sure somebody else doesn't get hired, and just saying somebody who should have been hired, sort of saying, listen, it's not about money, I would do it for free. I think a lot of people misunderstood Sean.
I took it to be more hyperbolic, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I want to make that clear because that came up a few times after my article and subsequent stream about it. But you know, but this is the reality is you give up your money to get in, and then it just seems to be there's always like this expectation that, listen, we're having a hard time, the product's having a hard time, these rates need to keep coming down. And it's like, well, you can only go so fucking low for what you do. I also do want to say as well, I fucking hate the way that a lot of people who hire talent, remember I was doing that when I was at WSOE, why are they so convinced that they need to haggle? You know, you're not in a marketplace in fucking Marrakesh or something, homie. Like, why? I've never met anyone when I've tried to hire talent, like, where it's, you know, like, they're super shocked if I go, what do you think you're worth? What's a fair rate for you? And they've gone, yeah, and I've gone, okay, it's done. Fuck it. Like, you know your own value, and I know commensurate to what you're going to bring to a broadcast if that value is fair. That's it. There shouldn't be, you give me your rate, and then I try and knock you down just for the sake of it. Like, what? It's just fucking weird. Like, and that goes on all the time, even with long-term business partners, long-term, you know, freelancers. You know, ESL are fucking notorious for that shit, by the way. And it's like, you're always constantly having to like haggle to get what you got the last time, because they keep trying to gaslight you into telling you things have changed. Well, that's got to stop now that they've fucking got the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund back.
I think
in
it will.
them.
To be fair, like, I think it will, and at least in my negotiations with Faceit, like they've never, like for example, when I've done Faceit events that were not Counter-Strike stuff or worked for them, they've never actually like tried to screw me over.
Yeah.
So, but it's
you caught him in that sweet 2-year span, Monty. Yeah, congrats. Wish it could have been the same for all of us.
We'll see.
It could have been the same for all of us.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that goes, right? Because as Richard says, now that they have money, in theory, they should be able to offer people multi-year deals, right?
Weird how trickle-down economics never fucking actually trickles down from the people who've got the money that could make it trickle down.
Because
the only thing that brings down is the fucking diarrhea.
This does segue though into a key point, and particularly Riot Games of all the devs is the most guilty of this. Here's one reason why they would haggle with you as well, Richard. Just to psychically have one up on you.
Yes.
Just to put you under their boot and make sure you look up at them from the boot and realise you are under the boot. And that at no point in time do you ever imagine in this dynamic you have the upper hand. Even though, by the way, expressly, I'm coming to you essentially in good faith and saying you're one of the best talents in the world and I want to have you on my event because it would make it better. But I'm not going to treat you that way. I'm going to treat you like you're the last little orphan trying to get in fucking room at the inn, and I might let you in if you do what I say. Like that's the worst part about it. They take the best talents and they treat them like they're like the fucking runaway. I want to make it in Hollywood. And they're like, you want to come to a party, love? Like, fucking hell. Why do they have to crawl across glass to get a job that they're the best in the world at? Because one of the other things I've heard that they're doing in Valorant as well, and if I look literally look at the talent pages on Liquipedia for all the Valorant events, it lines up with what people have told me, which is that they've also done another of my biggest pet peeves for anyone hiring talent, which is you just go out there and you engage with all the talent you can find with the express intention of using rates against each other, but more importantly, you want an enormous turnover so that they all feel uncertainty. So what you want it to feel like is none of us could be here next time. And in fact, because they've asked like 30 people and they're only going to hire, let's say, 12 or whatever, actually, we're just making sure that once it gets around to everyone, they asked you as well, and they asked me, and they asked Mary, like, at that point in time, even though, as I said, in good faith, you're supposed to be approaching the guy you want to do your event. You're making it feel the opposite way, like it's an exclusive club, and now you're on some like musical chair shit where only 12 is going to get in out of 30. It's like, you can see psychically how this is a very effective manipulation tool. You don't even have to actually expressly say it to the guy, I'm fucking you over. He sort of senses it,
It's worse than that too, because what they do is they go, charge us a half rate. Oh, you're doing 1 best of 3. Oh, we can't pay you standard rate. Like I literally asked someone the other day, I'm like, okay, what are you fucking getting paid straight up? And they're like, oh, this much, but I'm only doing 1 best of 3. I don't give a shit. I don't get out of bed for less than a fucking day rate, motherfucker. Like you cannot, I don't know when this idea just appeared where people started going, what's your half day rate? What's your COVID day rate? What's your fucking supplying your own gear and sitting in front of your desk day rate? You know what I mean? Like I understand like some rates maybe you got like maybe nominally lower because you're at home and you got, there's less overhead for TO. That's fine. But like some of them are just egregious. And the fact that so many TOs are also using a pandemic scenario to try and force these prices down, and the half rate is just absurd. Just a message to casters out there: if someone offers you a half rate, tell them to fuck off. All right, what are you going to do? You're going to cast one thing in the morning, one thing in the afternoon? Is that how it works? No, it's not. You spend the day preparing
the same
all this
amount of
off-camera
research.
shit.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's what people think. It's like, well, when you charge a day rate, that also includes the 4 days of prep that you did on this tournament, because oftentimes, especially for tournaments, you don't know what games you're going to cast, so you have to be prepped for everything. And also,
this
if
is
you're doing
why,
your job
by the way,
halfway correctly, you should be prepped for everything.
This is why during the major there was an incident that really triggered people like me and Richard, because unfortunately fans assumed, right, that because there was that whole thing of would Bardolph cast the semi-finals or not, their assumption was, well, he's also getting his money taken, isn't he? It's like, no, that's not the way CSGO works. In CSGO, you are just hired for the event, and if you cast 1 game a day or 3, you just do a day rate, that's it. And so, by the way, for the event, because no one knows who's doing the playoffs, everyone gets all their days. So that means, yes, you all know that DDK and Bardolph did 1 playoff. They got all the other days. They got the other quarterfinal day, the semi-final day, and the final, which they did not work. Although I'll give good DDK.
Zadikist even got paid for the day he was deported.
There you go.
Just beat that for a fucking.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
But no, but one thing I do want to discuss here, and especially.
By the way, shout out to whoever figured that out, paying Sadikist to fuck off. That's an innovative idea. No one's thought of that one yet. No one's thought of that one. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.